This is the Guns Magazine podcast, quick hit episode number 36. Hi there, and welcome to another quick hit episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting people who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. Today's episode is another gathering of our resident gun cranks, myself, publisher Roy Huntington, and American Handgunner editor Tom McHale, as we discuss terror at the 25-yard line, the 4 firearm safety rules and how they're often violated. But before we get started, I'd like to remind you this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast is sponsored by our friends at Kimber. Kimber was founded with the singular purpose of making every firearm the best it can possibly be, with a fit and finish that only practiced hands can achieve and appreciate. Whether you carry a Kimber for personal protection, hunting, or competition, know that their promise of quality without compromise is how they measure success. To learn more about Kimber firearms, visit kimberamerica.com. The 4 safety rules have been around a long time, and frankly, too many shooters simply take them for granted. During our chat today, taken from our most recent Gun Cranks Live episode on Facebook and YouTube, we share stories of safety violations we've seen and experienced in our decades of shooting across the world. Hopefully, it'll inspire you to double your efforts to be even safer on the firing line. Now, here's our Guns Magazine podcast quick hit episode on the 4 firearms safety rules. I'm going to start, number 1, and this is truly the Cardinal Rule. This is like the golden rule of shooting. Treat all guns as if they're always loaded. It's that simple. And we see that so often where people don't really believe that. And I know,
and they go, oh, I know it's not loaded. It's like, no, they don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Until that gun is like disassembled into individual component pieces, it's never really unloaded. And that's what makes me insane when I go to like a gun show, especially. We were kind of talking before we got started. You know, you go to a gun show, and I haven't personally checked all 42,000 guns there, and you're constantly, people are pointing guns at you because they're unloaded. Well,
you know who understands this rule?
Who's that?
Kids. And I'm being dead serious. When I take a lot of new people shooting, and, you know, we always have a little briefing at my house. Usually it's a family, you know, mom, dad, 1 or more kids.
Yeah.
And we talk about the rules, and a gun is always loaded. And at the end of the talk, I open it up and I show it to them, and I say, is this gun loaded? And without fail, I mean, 100% of the time, the adults go, yeah, it's unloaded. And the kids goes, it is too loaded. You know,
Yeah,
I get it.
Yep. Well, you know, I've often said we often get, you know, letters. Hey, what's the best gun? What's the, you know, basically they're asking, what's the most dangerous gun I can use if I have to use for self-defense? What is the single most dangerous gun in the world? It's the unloaded gun, because that's the one that's always doing things. And Roy, you had a little experience just this week with an unloaded gun.
just a couple days ago. And this kind of also goes to the rule 2, which is don't point your gun at anything you're not willing to shoot. But I had fixed a gun for a kind of a neighbor here, you know, real nice guy, elderly gentleman in his 80s, not real familiar with guns. And so I got him sorted out. We were standing in my driveway here, and I had the gun. It was a semi-auto, and it was, you know, broken open with a slide back. And I went over what was going on. I handed it back to him. And then so he was holding it and finger outside the trigger, and he was like talking and thanking me and all this kind of stuff. And then pretty soon it was like, as he's waving his arms around, he muzzles me a couple of times, right? And so I just reached up and I pushed it aside like that. And I said, hey, you know, you have to be really careful. Don't point your gun at people. And he said, what did he say? He said,
let me guess.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not loaded.
It's not loaded.
Yeah. And so we had another conversation then about, well, it may or may not be unloaded, but the problem is it's a bad habit to get into, because someday you're going to pick up a gun that actually really is loaded and you're going to muzzle somebody. And what is it? There's the 2 loudest sounds in the world. Is a click when you were expecting a bang, and a bang when you were expecting a click. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I have had one of those.
Well, if everybody wants to see the classic "this gun is unloaded" story, Google the video, the DEA agent teaching a class of kids in Florida about gun safety.
I know. I
He
can't
pulls
even
a
watch
Glock
it.
40 off the shelf, and he goes, this is a Glock 40. It's unloaded. And I'm the only one professional enough that I know of to handle this safely. And he proceeds to wave it around and teach the class. And there's a room full of 20, 30 kids and parents and all this, and proceeds to shoot himself in the foot. And the guy continues on like nothing happened. And then a minute or two later, he goes over to the corner and he tries to get a big rifle, to show them. He's like, this is unloaded. And the whole room, I kid you not, goes, no.
Put it down.
Leaving.
I know. I can't watch it. There's another one on YouTube of some guy, I don't know, he's like doing fast draws at the close in target or something, some kind of a chunky looking guy. And he draws a 1911 out of his holster. The finger must have been on the trigger or something, shoots himself in the thigh or the leg or something. And he goes, I don't mean to laugh, but it's like, and he goes, oh, crap, I shot myself. And it's like, yeah, well, you moron, you pointed the gun at yourself while you were drawing. My God. This all guns are always loaded it's number one for a reason. I think it's because it's the anchor one. I mean, if you would just assume that and then pay attention to the other ones, and everything will be fine. It's like the other one on the range there. And this goes to number 2, which is the muzzle control, but it's still the loaded thing. It's, hey, shooter number 2, are you having a problem there? And they turn around and of course they muzzle all of their students on the side, and then you in the range clubhouse, and, and I think it's just training. And that's why we took the time to do this. A lot of people see these rules, but I think if let's do what we're doing, which is talk about the reasons behind them, and what does all guns are always loaded really mean? And it just means just what it says. Darn it.
We're poking fun here, but there's a serious underlying point, and you can't expect anyone to pick up a gun for the first time and intuitively know these things. I mean, if you took an alien and dropped them in an automobile, would they instinctively know to check the oil, every time they fill up with gas? No, somebody has to teach you some basics, So,
and I think that goes to an important point that we've kind of been hammering on here. There are so many literally brand new gun owners. We as experienced shooters need to mentor these folks. And the first thing we need to mentor them in is safety.
Did you see the NICS test in June was the highest ever. For June, for the month of June, highest ever. And we've had some pretty darn high ones before. Well, and that talking to gun store owners, they've seen various waves through the pandemic, and now this last group, and I would say this just from the input I'm getting from readers and even friends, this last group are the ones that have suddenly realized for the first time in their lives, they want a gun to protect themselves. And these are the least prepared of the new gun owners. The first group was, a lot of people said they were kind of, they were thinking about getting a gun for protection, but the pandemic brought all that out. So at least they'd been thinking about it. This last group literally are the panic buyers to a large extent, and they're buying anything they can get their hand on, and they're not prepared. So again, we need to mentor them, especially in these 4 safety rules.
I think following on to what you said, I'm excited about that. I may be in the minority, but I think this is a great thing because it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to talk to these people and go shooting with them and take them to the range and teach some of these safety principles. And, hey, let's grow the community,
Yep. Well, before I move on to number 3, I was just going to make one last thing about rules number 1 and 2. I consider that it's not the holy trinity. It's like the holy duality or whatever, because if you follow rule 1, which is all guns are always loaded, and number 2, never let the muzzle cover anything you're not willing to destroy, you'll never have a tragedy. You won't. It's physically impossible. If you're treating the gun like it's loaded and you don't point it at something you don't want to shoot, easy peasy. But unfortunately, those are probably the 2 that are most frequently broken.
Can I share a visual on rule 2? That's just helped me.
Because we need to talk about rule 2 a little bit more. Yeah.
With teaching people. I ask them, have you ever seen Star Wars? They go, yeah. I said, you like those lightsabers? They go, yeah. I said, now imagine one that is 2 miles long, 2 mile long lightsaber, and it's stuck on the end of this gun. So wherever it goes, it's just wiping out everything from 0 to 2 miles away, and it's just been a good way to reinforce the point that we're not talking about just aiming and pointing. We're talking about this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I was on a range, and I've since adapted it. It's similar to that, but it's just a 36 caliber dowel, 2 or 3 feet long, and you just stick it in the muzzle. And I use painter tape, and then I just stand next to the person, and I said, "Okay, now move your gun around," and you can see their eyes go, they don't realize, especially when they'll move the gun and it'll bump you on the shoulder, the little thing. And you go, see, look, you almost covered me with a muzzle,
That's a great visual. I mean, it's something you kind of want to keep in your shooting bag for range outings, It's
really cool. I keep 2 or 3 by my back door here, and it actually works really well. But I think the never point a gun at anything you're not willing to shoot. People, that sounds dramatic. It's like, don't do this unless you're willing to shoot it, but it's what that means is don't point your gun at the dog. Don't point your gun at the TV set, which
it depends what's on. So.
Yeah, it depends on as a policeman, I certainly responded to a house one time. The guy had an AD and absolutely blew his TV set right to bits. And for some reason, he felt necessary to call the police because he had discharged a firearm within the city limits. And so we sorted that out. I remember one time there was a guy he was cleaning his gun. He shot his wife in the calf, and so it is a reality. And it's like that stunned silence after the gun goes off, I was in our locker room and we were securing shift. I was coming off graveyard. First watch was coming in. And so, Brent, there's that flurry of activity in the locker room there, and everyone's laughing and joking and playing grab ass and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden it was like, bam, right? And cue the crickets. It was so quiet.
Everybody freezes for a second.
Everybody freezes. And I remember I looked down because we had big station stuff. And I looked down and there was a little tendril of smoke coming above one of the lockers. Right. And so I slid sideways and I looked down the aisle. And meanwhile, at the other end, there's like a half a dozen faces looking back up toward me. And there's one guy standing there pointing down at his locker, his 6-inch Model 10, finger on the trigger, everything. Right. So I have no idea why. He had gone through the locker door, the cheap metal locker door, into his posse box. Remember the aluminum posse box that you carry your reports in? Through that, and then his vest had actually stopped it in his locker. Wow. And so, boy, I'll tell you, that was fastest I'd ever seen the locker room clear out, too.
Exactly.
We're gone.
I'm not making a statement on that one. I didn't see a thing. I was looking that way.
Didn't hear a thing, didn't I mean, that was probably 35 years ago or 40 years ago, but that was anyway, we laugh at it now, but I mean, what if that had gone through the locker and
well, that's the first 2 rules. Treat all guns as if they're always loaded, and never let the muzzle cover anything you're not willing to destroy. Number 3 is keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target. And some people say, and you made the decision to shoot, but I kind of stick to just keep your finger off the trigger until you put the gun on target.
Well, hence what you see, everybody, you see the pictures, people see the new shooters out there. Pay attention. When you see people holding their gun like that, there's a reason for that, because your finger's off the trigger until your sights are on the target. And then your finger goes on the trigger. It's as simple as that, because your gun can't shoot unless you pull the trigger.
Not to talk too much about current events, because there's just nothing fun about that. But if you saw the picture of the couple in St. Louis defending their home against the nonviolent social justice protesters, at one point I saw one picture. The lady had her finger on the trigger, pointing the gun at people. And
she did.
Yeah.
Funny. Well, keep your finger off the trigger till your sights are on the target. I was hunting with somebody one time, and they were hunting just below me, the over-under shotgun. And as we were wearing like kind of those oiled canvas chaps because it was real thorny and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so they were walking down below and through some pretty heavy brush. And then I saw their gun was held down at their waist. And then I saw they were like caught or something, in the mess. And then he went as if he's like, pulling the shotgun away from a branch or something. And it just fired, and it hit the dirt right in front of him like that. And and then he was like, looked down at it and tried to figure out what was going on. Well, I watched him for a minute, and then we got together and I said, hey, what the hell happened down there? And what happened was he had the safety off. Okay. And then his belt buckle strap from his belt got in the trigger guard. It actually poked through the trigger guard. And so as he pulled it away, the gun went off. But he had good muzzle control. So never point a gun at anything you're not willing to shoot. The muzzle wasn't pointed at me or the dog, or it was pointing at the dirt in front of him as he did it. But you don't think it's not going to happen to you, because you just never, you just never know.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't talk about the rationale behind this, and it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. If you don't have your finger on the trigger, you won't fall prey to what we call startle response, sympathetic squeeze, or simply tripping and falling, because Lord knows I'm maybe one of the biggest klutzes on earth. And if I had my finger on the trigger every time I stumbled and fell, there'd be rounds flying all over the place. But the other couple, where I was going with this, was startle or a sympathetic squeeze. Yeah. And if you're not familiar, that means under a high stress situation, if you try to do something with this hand, there's a good chance you'll do it with this hand. If you're grabbing a door, if you're doing something. And I remember one time we'd been in a car chase that ended up, the guy crashed out in the country and we're looking for him. So it's basically me and this guy somewhere out in the field, and I couldn't find him. And I kind of had isolated him down along this creek, and we weren't sure if he was armed or whatever. So my adrenaline has up after this chase and all this stuff. And I remember so vividly, I had my walkie-talkie in one hand and I had my pistol out in the other in case this guy started shooting, and I had good finger discipline. I had that finger straight, but every time I went to trigger the push to talk switch on my microphone, I remember looking at my finger and it's like, I'm trying to pull the trigger. It caught me. I was trying to pull the trigger, and it was just good old fashioned sympathetic squeeze. And the fact that I even recognized it was happening, I couldn't stop myself from doing it. So it's real.
Moss talks about that sometimes in his Ayub files, where some police shootings to where that exact thing happens. Somebody grabs and squeezes. There's also there's a sympathetic thing. It happened on our agency one time where two cops, both pointing guns at bad guys, right? Same bad guy. One cop shoots, the other guy shoots and was reflexive. Yeah. His finger was on the trigger at the time, appropriate or not, I don't know. I wasn't there, but yeah, that's where all these new shooters, I think if your training is TV or video games, it just isn't the case in the real world. The whole keep your finger off the trigger till your sights are on the target also applies. Tom, you brought this up. It was really a good point, is at gun stores and stuff like it, or maybe it was you, Brent, but how many times have we both stood at a counter at a gun store and a clerk hands somebody a gun across the counter, and then the first thing this person does is holds it like this and points it at you when you're standing right next to them. And now, like you say, I haven't checked that gun. Their finger may not be in the trigger guard, but you don't know what's going to happen. A gun could slam fire. You never know. And but that's something, if you're a new shooter or if you're looking at guns right now, is be very cognizant of that. Is that when you're in the gun stores, all these rules apply, maybe tenfold, because you're surrounded by people and a lot of novices. And to the gun store clerks who are out there listening, ladies and gentlemen, please be careful and be a good example.
Well, the beauty of it is it's a habit. It's a physical habit. Like anything else, you do it a couple thousand times consciously and it becomes subconscious. I mean, and the beautiful manifestation of that is if you've ever been to an action shooting competition where one of the competitors is running across the field and he trips and falls. And I've seen people trip and fall, then you watch them, the fingers out of the trigger, and the whole time they're literally falling on their face and barrel rolling and all this completely out of control. The muzzle's pointed down range because it's just so wired in their brain.
Yes.
It's amazing to watch. And you go, that's an ingrained habit right there.
Well, if I'm working on a gun on my workbench that's disassembled, and I'll pick it up, do something on it, file on it, put it down, walk over there, get something, come back, pick it up. I check it. I mean, it's a gun that's in parts. But I'll look in the cylinder, or, you can't help it. It's got to be automatic. It's got to be 100% of the time, because the second you don't do it is when that really loud noise when you didn't expect it to happen occurs.
Yeah.
And I wanted to circle back to something Tom said a couple of topics ago, but he was absolutely dead on, was making this a habit. And as a new shooter, and we're talking to those folks that just bought these guns, if you go to the range, if you go to take instruction, triple your efforts to be safe, because what happens is you go into mental overload. You've got to do this, stand this, hold, and you don't want to look like an idiot. So you're so worried about 10,000 other things that when something happens that disrupts that flow, that's when you do stuff. Again, this thing of pointing a gun at your head while you're adjusting your headphones, or, trying to load it and you're pointing down at the entire line, and then somebody calls you out, whoa, that's when bad things happen. And Just don't get flustered. Just don't get upset. We don't expect you to be perfect. Just be safe as much as you can and take it slow. And if you find yourself getting into total overload, mental lockdown, there's another term, you don't know whether to defecate or go blind, just stop. Nothing will happen if you just stop.
And if you do break a rule and you accidentally cross someone with your muzzle and they say, hey, be careful, watch your muzzle, the proper response is, thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize.
Yep.
And I'll be more careful. It's not, oh, it's not loaded, or I wasn't really pointing it at you, or just don't be a,
You almost said it.
And you know what? Communication goes a long way.
No, wait, you know what?
Too.
No, I'll say it. Don't be a dickhead. Okay, it's as simple as that. Because this is serious stuff. Can you say that
on global television?
I know we can say that on global FMG television, but no, that's the problem. We've all seen that. Somebody crosses you with a muzzle, you say, "Hey, watch my muzzle." They get all defensive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like no, but yet I've said that to a guy, and he said, "You know what, Roy, man, I really apologize. I know better than that." But to me, that just shows even a really experienced shooter will have a lapse of judgment.
Hey, we can all do it.
Yeah, as long as you're adhering to the never point your gun at anything, keep your finger off the trigger. So his finger wasn't on the trigger, so the chances are I'm not probably going to get killed, right? But he still violated one of the rules. What'd you say, Brent? You violate 2 and you're generally in trouble.
Yeah. You have to violate 2 to make a tragedy happen. So,
you know what? Advanced communication goes a long way too. Every time I take somebody new to the range, I tell them before we leave, I say, look, and we can have some fun with this. I say, look, I'm going to pick on you about your trigger finger because, it's a natural place to put your fingers right in there. It's kind of designed for that in a sense. So you're going to want to do that. So I'm going to help you remember not to. And just with that little bit of heads up, hey, this is coming. Nobody gets offended.
That's like, a great idea. I always have a safety briefing. It doesn't matter who's here. I don't care how experienced they are or anything.
I bet you guys do the exact same thing. Here's a little insider tip. Since I go to a lot of training, we go to a lot of media events. Every reputable trainer or school will have a safety briefing. And you've probably heard these rules 10,000 times. But you know what? I obviously pay attention, but I'm also looking around because if I see the guy kind of doing this, he's the guy I'm going to keep my eye on because he doesn't take it serious. He may have shot much more than I have, and he's been in all kinds of stuff that I haven't. But if he's not taking safety serious during the briefing, I don't know if I can trust him behind my back on the line. There's
a reason airline pilots still use a written checklist for everything they do, even though they've done it 10,000 times before,
That's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what this is it's a written checklist.
Exactly.
Where you start shooting, you stop and you read your, checklist there. So shall we talk a little bit about be sure of your target and the backstop beyond? Because I know there's some confusion about that. What does that really mean?
Tom, I think you had
Well, I ran across about a year ago a great illustration of how not to do it. Maybe that'll help illustrate the point. I was at my outdoor range. At the time it was an unattended range, just kind of a public facility, roof, 100-yard rifle range. And 3 people showed up, younger folks, probably early 20s or so, 2 men and a woman. And they set up a rifle with a scope on one of the tables. And the woman stays back at the rifle and the 2 guys go down range when it was cold to set up the target, 50 yards or so out there. And they're all 3 in on this. So I'm not blaming any one of the 3. They're shouting back and forth, telling the woman, okay, now look through the rifle and we're trying to get it placed correctly sideways. So she's hunched over, and it wasn't her fault because they're telling her to do it.
Right.
And she's participating. Right. And these 2 guys are shifting the target back and forth and she's literally aiming at them through the rifle like this, yeah, that's perfect. I see you exactly now.
Yep.
And, you said it's not her fault because she was doing what they were saying, but actually it is also her fault,
I'm just making a point. It was everybody's fault. I'm not picking on her as,
I think, and that brings up an important point, which is if your gut says, I don't know that this is a really good idea. Yeah. Well, if you're dealing with guns, then everybody has to stop for a minute and look at what's going on. Be sure of your target and the backstop beyond. What happens is people, new shooters especially, they get so excited. I'm out here. I'm in the woods. I want to get to shoot my gun for the first time. They put a target up on something and then they take a shot and there's deer behind it, or there's the neighbor's, cows, or the dog ran up and they didn't notice because they're so hyper-focused on the target. Where I shoot outside of my office here, I've got 4 or 5 acres, I guess, back here, and there's a steep hill, and then there's a walnut grove, which is heavily wooded. But when I set a target about there, I always stop, and before I go to actually shoot, I stop, I look at the target, and then I look really closely in the background, to make sure. And sure enough, sometimes there's a deer, there's the neighbor's dog, there's something. Yep. So that's all that means. And even if you're in the range, in an indoor range, you don't know if somebody's going to walk down. Have you ever had that? Who here's had that happen? You're shooting on the range and you see activity outside of your corner of your eye, and some idiot's walking down on the edge to change his target while you're shooting while the line's hot,
And even if you're the newest shooter on the line, everybody needs to sing out, ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire.
That's a good point, Brent. He just said something very important, and that is that everybody is a safety officer.
Yeah.
With ultimate, and I would add to that, with ultimate authority, no matter who you are and how experienced you are, if you see something that you're not comfortable with, yell, shout it out, stop.
And new people tend to not want to do that. It's like, I really don't know what I'm doing. And he's pointing his gun at me, but he's a more experienced shooter, so it's okay. No, it's
well
not.
said. That's the scenario. And that's how people get shot,
Yep.
And there's nothing cool about being unsafe, in spite of what some people seem to think. And so if you're practicing with your gun, that's not the time to swagger. That's not the time to, what is it you call have your tactical grimace on?
Yeah.
This is not play acting. This is serious, and it can be fun. Yes. But, so treat it that way, and one of you guys said, just because you're a new shooter, don't be afraid to intervene. And I don't know how many people probably would be alive today if a novice watching a professional do something would have simply just intervened and said, hey, the wheel's about to fall off, or, the guy wire is broken, but they didn't because they thought, I'm new. I don't really know what I'm doing.
I don't know what I'm doing.
But if somebody's doing something you don't think is right, you don't have to be ugly about it, but just say, hey, wait a minute. And then if they're not very nice in response, that's okay. You did your job. Yeah.
I hope our discussion provided a little insight and even a little levity as we discussed an awfully serious topic. And with that, we hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Please tell all your friends, even the liberals. Guns Magazine is #1 in the business, and we're using our decades of friendships to bring you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you have questions, comments, or a guest you'd like to recommend for the show, please email me. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you don't miss out on anything by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast directory and YouTube. Of course, you can always listen and download our episodes at gunsmagazine.com, and while you're at it, don't forget to check out our sister publication, American Handgunner Magazine, at americanhandgunner.com. And finally, before we go, I'd like to remind you to check out our sponsor and good friend, Kimber Firearms, at kimberamerica.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast for the entire thundering herd at FMG Publications. I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there safely and get shooting.